Hey there, ghosties. Welcome to the Ghost Lights Podcast, episode 70. This week, we sat down with Brian Freeland, one of the creative minds behind the creation of the Lighter Project while in Denver. I've had the good opportunity to work with him here as he's traveled back and forth from New York. We talked about the birth of his love affair with theater and some of the challenges that face both New York and Colorado's communities. I hope you sit back, enjoy. We are back. We're not going away anytime soon. Now, Dan, kick us that War by the Hypnotic Brass Ensemble. Ghosties, we are back. It is your boy, Sam Gilstrap. That name has a ring to it like a wedding vow. I know that's like an old intro, but I'm feeling like we need to go back into time a little bit. It's been a while. You've missed the sound of my voice. You've missed my presence, or at least that's what my ego is telling me has been the case this entire time. So we're back. And what better way to come back than with a man I would say is a genius based off my opportunities being able to work with him. If you've had the opportunity to work with Brian Freeland, I'm sure you would probably say the exact same thing when you described him. Brian Freeland from NYC. Welcome to the Ghost Lights Podcast.
Sam, how are you, my friend?
I am doing great. Good to see you. I got to tell you, before we jumped into this, you called this a date, and I did start blushing. It's been a long time. So if I get down on one knee and propose to you by the end of this evening, just know that I get a little nervous, and sometimes I give too much of myself early on. So please be gentle when you reject me.
Always, okay. Man. Always.
Thank you. Oh, mercy.
I love it.
I want to start off with just this icebreaker that's been kind of on my mind. And if you don't want to go down this road with me, we can absolutely go in a different direction. But do you have a favorite childhood meal? Like, was your mom or your dad really good cook? And there's like, oh man, if I could have this right now, I'd go back to 6 years old.
Man, so yeah, my father every Friday night, I think it was every Friday, felt like every Friday.
Yeah,
they'd make homemade tacos.
Oh,
and so from a corn tortilla, deep fried, thrown in there, crunchy. Nobody makes them like that anymore. So that's kind of, and then we'd have like a bunch of popcorn and punch and watch movies on a Friday night. So,
oh man, what were you? Did you have like the same couple of movies you'd watch every Friday night, or?
Oh no, no. I think I grew up in that sweet spot of an era where cable had just come out. So it was like either cable or like the 5 movies at the gas station for VHS tapes.
Oh yeah.
And so it was like, the best of 1984 movies. I mean, that HBO or something would have on. So we would catch the same movie, and then of course it would be on again and again. And I think we watched The Shining like 7 Fridays in a row. So
oh man, that's a good prime movie. Time.
It is a primetime movie. It is a primetime movie.
I was I had the duplicate copies of the movie Predator, which came out in 1987. And I was like, oh, I'm going to give the DVD that I have, can keep the Blu-ray. I'm going to give the DVD to a student at the school that I teach at. And I found a student, a guy who played wide receiver on my football team. And I was like, I'm giving this to you. And
you must understand the importance of this.
I put it in his hand. It was like, this is Arnold Schwarzenegger at his absolute best. This is a triumph of action movies. It's important to me that you understand this, Rodney, and I need you to love this movie. There's no book report due on this. but I want it to touch you as though as it touched me. And he looked at me and was like, okay, mister. And he went to the Boys and Girls Club to play basketball. And
And any life-changing report back from Rodney?
No, we're going to
Ever?
find out. I did it today.
Okay.
I did it today.
Okay. Today. Okay. So
I am emotionally attached to this whole moment that I shared with him. And it is important to me that he watches this. I know he does not listen to the podcast, but if he does, Rodney, if you don't tell me that you love that movie, it's totally fine. It's just an action movie. There's an alien, Bill Duke, Jesse the Body Ventura.
Yep.
Men sweating and lifting weights and then getting destroyed by.
It was that era, that late '80s era, in which wrestlers would then try to make their break into film, right?
Yeah.
Like that was really that golden era of wrestler becoming actor movies.
Yeah, we're like 5 years removed from Hulk Hogan being Thunder Lips
in
the third Rocky movie, which, by the way, one of the worst names ever for a wrestler, I think, especially because when I thought of Hulk Hogan, it had nothing to do with his lips.
No, not at all.
And if it's like related to his ability to cut a good promo, it's a little that's too subtle a reference to the wrestling world to drop in a movie about Rocky Balboa.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Anyway, let's let me get get off my little soapbox here about kayfabe and wrestlers and action movies. Brian Freeland, tell me, how did theater happen to you?
Oh, I mean, I don't think I had that unique a story. I mean, it's probably the same story that most of us have found, trying to fit in as an adolescent and finding that tribe. I mean, I found it pretty early, 9th grade. I think it found me in a very strange way. I mean, there was a girl involved in which she wanted to audition for a show, but because she wanted to go after a boy, and convinced me to audition alongside her. We both got in. She, of course, fell out of enamoration with this boy, and I guess I fell in enamoration with theater, and I found a ton of solace. I mean, I was kind of a lost kid for a lot of my youth, and I think it was the one grounding that I had. And like a lot of kids to theater, you find yourself first in performance. You're in an acting role or an acting, and then you find the entire making of that theater. But I was all in from the beginning. I was like, if I can come and paint the sets, great. If I can come run a spotlight, great. And so the more that I was in a theater, the safer I felt and the better I was at.
What was that show? Do you remember?
Yes, it was Fame, the musical.
Out.
Yes, with the younger generation players, which were it was a young person's theater company in Denver. They went on to have 35 plus years. They closed recently, probably within the last 10 years. The founder and her husband retired, but not after having brought a ton of kids in and out of that program. It was great.
Nice. Did you work with them a lot?
I did. I worked with them. I worked with them all the way through high school. Then I got involved, with high school theater too. And I got, the founder, Peggy Kerr, she was a tough love second mother
Mm.
She was no nonsense. And I was kind of an asshole at times, even to her. I mean, I just was a kid who was trying on all kinds of different personas and trying to figure it out. But
Mm.
she always kind of kept me centered, even when I was off the rails. And yeah, so she kept me on the straight and right. I mean, and it was I laugh now because it was traditional American uh musical theater.
Mhm.
And it's totally not the path that I ended up with in terms of genre in which I work in. But
Right.
and I've got this crazy soft spot for musicals. um mid-century musicals and later. So Rodgers and Hammerstein and things like that.
Oh,
So,
you've opened the door, and I'm a big fan of
oh
Mount Rushmore's. Yeah, I need your top
oh
4 musicals.
oh top four musicals. Well, I mean, I would say certainly you've got
The Scarlet
um
Pimpernel.
no, I wouldn't throw that. I'm gonna go classics for, and I would throw in the much uh 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 maligned Oklahoma.
Okay.
That I would throw that up there. And oh, I was reared on an Andrew Lloyd Webber, kind of like in that that period, and he wrote this incredibly obtuse musical called Aspects of Love
Mm,
that
never heard of
bombed. It's so convoluted, in which it has fading starlets and incest, and it's not the makings of the Broadway smash that Weber was known for later on. But I would throw that up there in the top.
it. Okay.
Um,
Nice.
the often overlooked sequel to Bye Bye Birdie, which is called Bring Back Birdie, which has a sequence in which there's now, instead of a telephone sequence, there's like a punk rock band. And yeah, very 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 strange little piece of musical theater. um what would my fourth be? Probably would have to probably round that out with there was The Mystery of Edwin Drood, the musical, is
Mm.
this strange little short-lived piece. I mean, of course, your musical theater fans are these are probably awful in terms of musicality and actual form, but they crash into a pretty soft spot for me.
That's that's I what is that about? I have like based off that title, I'm assuming it's like a biopic of a scientist turned rock star.
Oh no! So the Mystery of Edwin Drood was this piece of Dickens that he never finished, and
Mm.
so it's like this last. It's a mystery,
Mm.
and think of a la Clue or something, that where you have a murder, there's a mystery, and it's kind of a whodunit. But
Mm.
because the piece was never finished, it's often been kind of reimagined. um, I think I've got my facts straight, but it's often reimagined here with different endings. And so this was kind of a choose your own adventure ending
Oh man.
musical. So I think that there was 3 or 4 different endings to this musical, based on audience, some sort of like proto audience interactivity, that they chose the ending. So
That sounds
yeah.
amazing. Like I love the idea of there being this immersive live theater experience where you start out, you see the beginning of the show, and then depending on who you are drawn to the most in the opening number, you go to different rooms for the rest of the performance.
See now, yeah, you could take that piece
Yeah.
because never finished. Now you've got this framework in which you can start hanging on all kinds of interesting scenarios.
We need
Sam,
to
I think
get.
you've got a new piece.
I think what we need to do. You said this was Dickens that wrote this.
Yeah. Dickens.
We got to talk to the people who run his estate and get the rights to it, and then off center, go ahead and call me and Brian Freeland, and we'll work it out. I mean,
We'll work it out. Yeah.
We can make this work. Stanley Marketplace, it's kind of vacant right now. Let's kick
Is
some other
it?
people out. I have no idea.
Who knows?
I don't know. I don't go up there. I'm not allowed into Stapleton unless I'm house sitting. So,
Ooh.
Okay. First of all, I am jumping in. First of all, the Van Gogh exhibit is going into Stanley Marketplace, so it's not currently available.
Who?
Van Gogh. He's a painter.
Oh, he's
that guy.
Is he the ear guy?
A little bit, yeah.
Willem Dafoe played him in a movie.
Oh,
amazingly, yes.
Okay, but
although
great performance.
the other point is that I think you're onto something, because if you have 6 different options to go, now if someone liked it, they have to come back 6 times to see the whole show.
Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we're gonna make money, and if there's a theater company that has, I don't know, an adventurous palate, you might say, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, we could make this whole thing work. Listen to this podcast. Amanda Berg Wilson. Anyway, you mentioned another one that sounded like a Netflix series. What was this? The second one you did is the one. It was the Andrew Lloyd Webber piece.
Oh, the
incest.
aspects of love.
And the starlets. Yeah, the starlets coming. I guess, I don't know, falling from the sky to burn out on Earth. I don't know. I mean, it's not that sci-fi. My description is just that's where it went. I mean, that'd be a killer 5-episode miniseries on Netflix.
I dig it. I mean, I talk to people who are music theater fans, and this musical seems to have just died a quiet death in obscurity. But it's this weird, yeah. And it's actually it's a beautiful little piece. Dark as all get out, but yeah, somebody needs to unearth it, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a flashlight. We'll make it work.
Exactly.
So, which high school did you go to? Was it in Denver?
So I went to Chatfield High out in
sorry.
Littleton.
I'm sorry.
I know. Well, it was a long time ago, my friend.
I'm kidding. My last guest went to my high school, so it's like if we got back to back, that'd be pretty cool.
And what was your high school? You got to remind me.
Angels, East High, baby.
East High. I have a funny story that I begged my parents. Here I was, this little suburban kid out in Littleton, and I was like, I want to go to East High School.
Yeah, you do.
I want to go to East High School. And my parents looked at me like I was from Mars. And they were like, what? And I had it worked out. I was like, I can take a circular bus all the way out to Southwest Plaza. And then I can go from Southwest Plaza to Cinderella City Mall, which was still open. So we're about an hour into the trip now. And then I could take the 0 down and catch the 15. And I would only have to leave at 4:30 or 5 in the morning to get there for first period. I could totally do this.
Hey, just because you map that out, you're an angel in my book.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah.
Yes.
You graduated with honors in my book.
That was my alternative high school experience was being a student at East High School.
Nice. So you're studying theater as part of your high school curriculum, and did you stay with it when you got into college, or was it something else that attracted your attention?
Oh man, I was so ready to jump in, and so I left high school early. I had enough credits. I was so eager to start life. So I jumped out of high school a semester early, graduated a little early, and I went off to New York, and went into a conservatory program. I was like, I am not gonna. I mean, my head was so in the zone about jumping into the field and jumping into the scene. And Sam, I had never been to New York until I set foot. Got off at LaGuardia, off the plane. That was the first time I'd been to New York City, and then I was living there. So it was a crazy, crazy kind of whiplash from Denver as a high school student, and I was all of 18. So I mean, I'd certainly lived a little, but not enough to where, when I landed, I was in for a bit of a ride. And yeah.
Were your parents on board with this journey?
No, not at all. No, not at all. I mean, but at that point that's a whole another path of leaving high school early and, just kind of getting on with my life. I was ready to be an adult before I was an adult. So
you get off the plane. It's this crazy transition, a fish out of water, literally. Yeah. And what I'm trying to get the motivation of this 18-year-old kid, is it just the excitement of the art? Or were you thinking like, I'm ready right now to make it?
I mean, a little bit of both. I mean, obviously, there's elements of delusion at that age where you just start, imagining yourself in a scenario. I think part of it was, like I said, I wanted to start living life. And I had such a propensity to want to make theater. And at that point I wanted to be an actor.
Yeah. Clearly,
the world hadn't expanded yet. So I was ready to, and I didn't want to mess around. And in so much as like, that's why I decided I'm going to go conservatory. I don't want to mess around with waiting a second longer. I'm just going to immerse myself, jump in. And, of course, when I left Colorado and went there, I kind of had some ideas about what the world of theater was. And I think it was really kind of tuned into what I was receiving, a lot of commercial theater, a lot of more mainstream, either Broadway-esque or kind of off-Broadway type work. Mm-hmm. And I think that step that I took, the second I landed, my whole trajectory changed, because I found avant-garde theater. I found experimental theater. I mean, I landed right in this moment. It was the summer of '90, and right in that moment, there was this gigantic explosion of activity around the NEA and artists who were being challenged or their funding being taken away for some of their controversial art. And so New York was kind of like this center of this crazy downtown experimental theater scene. I mean, up until that point, I was certainly attracted to, things like Sam Shepard and some of those edgier plays, but the real, I think, avant-garde hadn't entered my periphery yet. And when it did, it kind of took me, and that that musical theater got left in the rear view, and a lot of the kind of more mainstream stuff really I never looked back at after that point.
Will you help me out? What does the NEA stand for?
So National Endowment for the Arts.
Oh,
and so No. I mean, and what was interesting is like that was the point in which it was in this moment where prior to this, artists would receive direct funding.
Hmm.
So if you had a project and you were an artist, you applied directly to the federal government. You could get an NEA grant.
Hmm.
Um, and there were four artists that were singled out for their controversial art. Karen Finley, Holly Hughes, Andre Serrano, and Tim Miller. And other than Andres Serrano, who was a photographer, the other were performance artists.
Mhm.
And they were making this incredibly edgy, queer, in your face experimental work. And, we had just kind of flipped into a stronger Senate. And Jesse Helms, who was decided he had a bee in his bonnet about the NEA and saying, well, why are we giving money to this woman who covers herself in chocolate and sticks yams up her cooch? And at the same time, or in very short succession, you had Robert Mapplethorpe in Cincinnati, and his photographs being scrutinized in much the same way. And so you had a lot of attention on individual artists making really provocative work. And it kind of crumbled. I mean, it was a lot of politicians wanting to cut the NEA because of some of this funding.
Mhm.
And it's been nearly a 30-year crawl out of that moment where so much of that funding was lost, or so much of the way in which we allocate funding to artists
Mhm.
was forever changed. I don't think it ever really recovered. It now is divvied up amongst the states, and the states then divvy it up further amongst companies. And it really has kind of been an insulated bit of funding that forever will never come back to scrutinize the federal government for people. Andres Serrano, who was the photographer, had his piece was called Piss Christ, and it was a crucifix immersed in urine.
Remember that.
And was it's quite a provocative statement. It's quite a provocative gesture. But just the fact that he was supported by the federal government in terms of money, it sent people out of their heads.
Mhm.
So the relationship to arts funding, I think, was forever changed. But while I was there, things were, those were some of the milder things that were going on. People were doing, this was a time in which, I feel like I was coming out of one era
Mhm.
and into another, and I just happened to be there for so many years. I was like, nothing, I kind of missed all the good stuff, missed
Mhm.
all the really, but looking back, there was some really seminal work that I was even lucky enough to see some of. Yeah,
It's
changed
it,
me.
I, certainly. I mean, based off just the little bit that you shared there, and then knowing the sparse things that I know about where I met you and what you were doing when our paths first crossed at Lida.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so like I can see some of that influence there. Uh, For me, as you were telling this story, I was just kind of I was in awe of the study that you had put into your life up until the time you move out to New York, and the type of theater that you think you are going to pursue and make, and then to see how there was this other world, this avant-garde world where the ideas that you were, I guess, drawn to in the beginning in terms of creation are tested, pulled in different directions. I would say that they're not necessarily like theater rules weren't being broken, but they were certainly being bent to see just
Yeah.
like, can you put words to kind of that experience watching your passions evolve in such a way?
Well, I think it, in so many ways it was so new. I mean, I remember in high school in Denver sneaking downtown um, with with my friend Dan, and we would go to um, the now defunct Jack's Theater, which was above Paris on the Platte, which is now defunct. I mean, the uh, and seeing companies like City Stage Ensemble and Hunger Artists making these gritty raw work. I mean, so it wasn't the first time I'd seen that, but just feeling so I guess titillated by like the rawness of a small theater, an intimate theater, saying raw things. Um, but then really being immersed in it, it was like teaching yourself how to cook and really enjoying food, but then having somebody come into your kitchen and say, oh, but there's this whole other refrigerator and there's this whole other set of ingredients that you could cook from. Let me give you a bite of this. And it's like, wow, this is the most delicious thing I've ever tasted. I mean, that other stuff was great, but this, man, this is, I mean, and for me, it hit me in all the ways that I think that I had been struggling to try to find. I mean, I really wanted, as a young kid, I wanted to kind of audaciously change the world, kind of like wanted to make a difference. Here was an art form that was challenging society in terms of conversations, in terms of politics, in terms of just pure ideology. Remember, this is also a time in which, the AIDS crisis was in full swing. So there was a lot of angry and immediate political theater. And there was amazing political theater that was that kind of ran the gamut. Some of it was crap and messy, and was put together in like a week and a half, and you could see that. But that wasn't the point. It was that this was a dialogue between artists and a community. And when I saw that, because you have to remember, up until that point, like I'd see a play meant this is something that I make a plan for, I go to, I buy a ticket, and I sit down and I watch in the dark, and I leave, and I feel really erudite, and I feel very, full of myself, and feel really, but I had never seen anything that raw, and anything that was that made the boundaries of what art making and community and dialogue and a place for an artist. It was so permeable. All of these things just started becoming so. For me, it started to crystallize what my path really wanted to be, and it wasn't necessarily in a path of commercial theater. And like I said, there were many years where I would really be kind of vehemently angry at commercial theater, and I have a soft spot for it. I mean, I feel like it always still has a place, but the more I've been able to be comfortable about my journey, the more I can actually point backwards and say, yeah, that has its place too. But this is the path that, and I have felt more comfortable with those of dissenting opinion, or sometimes a little bit more aggression in their message, a little bit more fire in the belly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find giving yourself permission to follow this new way of theater? Did you find that difficult?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it was difficult. I mean, it kind of took me. And I think it was difficult to find how I fit in, how I, because this wasn't something that you necessarily were, that somebody was going to train you how to do.
Yeah.
This was something that, certainly training and vocabulary around these experimental and avant-garde forms. I mean, you're really breaking the existing forms. So I kind of had to ask myself, I mean, I found the difficult part about it was like, I know how it is as an audience to be viscerally affected by this and receiving this. And I want to be the vessel, or I want to be the instigator now. Like, how does that happen? And it took me many years to kind of get, and to, so to speak, the voice. I knew the craft from up until that point and a little bit beyond, but then I knew the rules. I knew all the rules of what theater were. And so then I just began devouring, and then it was like this, I mean, all of it was there. I just hadn't opened the book. I look back and go, wow, this lineage of avant-garde work that preceded the moment that I was experiencing was rich and it was deep. And even to this day, discovering, because these are the outsiders. These are the people who aren't always on the front page, or who aren't getting reviews, or who, made a thing once in a warehouse with 10 people. And those 10 people, maybe something survived. And years later, it comes to go, wow, that was some seminal work. That was some seminal thought that was happening.
Yeah. Walk me through the transition back to Colorado and the creation of the Lida Project.
Yeah. So it was very, very, it was actually very direct. I mean, I stuck with this program that I was in. It was a 2-year program, and I stuck with this program for a year and realized I was in the wrong program. I didn't want to go into this commercial theater track, which was really where this conservatory was really aimed at. They really wanted to make, they wanted to give people a career in the arts, and they wanted to give people a career in Broadway. And but so when I was like, that's just not for me, I decided, well, okay, I'm gonna still stay in New York. And let me tell you how smart a decision being like a 19-year-old kid with no degree, with no job skills, trying to make your way. It was a disaster. I couldn't, in New York City. I mean, one of the most expensive places to live. I bounced around for a while, and then, I think things got real, and it got really kind of scary, to think, if I stay in New York, if I stay on this track, it's probably not going to go the way I really imagined life was going to go. And I was making, starting to think about making, I was making poorer and poorer decisions. Anyways, long story short, I was like, I think I should get out of New York. I think I should come back when I'm a little bit more settled and trained. And then, so I came back to Colorado. I came back to Colorado. It's my roots. I happened to have a young woman who I was sweet on and was courting at the time, who later turned out to be my wife. But so there was a reason. There was plenty of reasons to come back. So I came back, landed at UCD, and really decided to just finish my undergrad at UCD, and then I was going to get my shit together and kind of head back. But being kind of the snake bit, kid that I was with all of this new, my whole lens was all about making provocative work now, and wanting to do that work. And so, I was getting my undergrad, but I was also working with some of these indie and avant-garde companies that were kind of around at the time. And but ultimately I was auditioning for pieces that were really not experimental pieces. They weren't avant-garde pieces. They were, in small houses. They had kind of an indie theater ethos, but they weren't really experimental. They weren't really doing that. And so along with a handful of my undergrad classmates, we decided to I wasn't even out of undergrad. I took my student loan money, and we rented a warehouse, and and formed a theater company. And that's when Lita Project was born. And we
Holy crap.
yeah yeah, the bursar's office for many years later. I was never able to get my diploma because I owed them that last semester of money, of tuition that I never paid, because I started a theater company. And I don't want to say the rest is history, but it was a very crazy set of circumstances. I mean, we found a warehouse with a landlord that didn't care what we did in this big 5,000 square foot warehouse. And I gave up my apartment and moved into this warehouse and lived there. And the early days of Lita, we supported the company by throwing, for those who are around or were around would remember, we threw after hours raves. We would throw, there were, all night parties and things that because people would come to us and say, "Hey, can we throw a party here?" We're like, sure.
Yeah.
Great. Paid for the rent, paid for the theater company. And we had some, there was a ton of critics. There were a ton of critics at that time. And so we were lucky enough to land on a place where we were doing some interesting work. People who were writing for the paper love to write about interesting things, even if it's crap. It's something interesting to write about. And so we found ourselves in the early days just getting written about, whether or not they liked the work or hated the work. We were getting written about a lot because of kind of the work that we were putting out there, and that so that kind of took that circuitous little way. And then for the next 20 years, we and the cast of characters at Lita changed. There were many different incarnations and of core company ensemble members, but we kept trying to make work.
Yeah. I threw my hands up as you were telling your decision to spend your college money, because first of all, that takes a great deal of courage. And second of all, I have always been a guy that's kind of managed and mitigated what I could and couldn't do by the lack or abundance thereof of cash in my account in terms of like what I'm doing with theater. So to hear that, I'm just like,
Oh yeah.
holy crap, this guy really loves it. I
Oh
hope
man.
just hook, line, and sinker. You bought in. That's amazing. That's
I
amazing. There's
did.
no half stepping. One of the things that I'm getting from over the course of this of our conversation this far is that, I mean, the focus. There's a maybe it's not a focus but a fixation on at 18. I love theater. I'm gonna get out of
Yeah.
school early. I'm going to New York because that's where it happens. And then you're there, and then what you were in love with that got you out there is you're shown this other door, and it's creaked open a little bit, and you poke your head in, and it's like the Pulp Fiction's briefcase. You open it up and like, holy shit, this is what I had. This is the new thing. This is where my draw is now. And then
Yeah.
even when it, quote unquote, I mean, there's going to be people out there, well, it didn't work out there in New York for you, but that's not the end of the story. You come back, you're still studying, you're still in it. You're connecting with these people that are like, yes, that's the kind of shit I want to be a part of. That's the kind of shit I want to do. And then to go out and just be like, this is a giant risk, but fuck it. Put the money at the warehouse table and go to work. And creating a community, not necessarily reaching out to these people that say wanted to put on a party or an event in your space, but then having them come to you to keep this dream alive over the course of 20 years it's staggering and really impressive.
What was crazy, and Sam, what was interesting is that at the time, as I was auditioning and really wanting to see the work that I'd seen in New York, in Denver, it became really clear that if I wanted to see that work, I had to make that work.
Mm-hmm.
That I could sit around and wait. I mean, and there's never, I think, I guess there's never a more idealistic, moment than to say, well, I could do that. I could fill that void. Mm. And, being that young kid thinking that, this is what Denver needs. Denver needs, I mean, I was blown away. I was blown away by this work, and not seeing it in Denver felt like there was space and there was room to introduce some of this work to Denver's community. And for those years, it wasn't just always about running a theater company. It was being a part of a community. It was trying to be and build a place, build a part of the ecosystem. I mean, as companies were growing and emerging, and others were sunsetting and going away, I mean, it's always an ecology. You have regional theaters. You have at that point there were dinner theaters. You have mid-tier companies. You have community theaters. I mean, it's all part of that ecology in which we work in, but then our community imbibes in. They need to have a little bit of the Denver Center, and they need to have a little bit of Curious. They need to have a little bit of Catamounts, and then they need to have a little bit of Lita. I mean, it gives a holistic kind of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Forgive me. You had mentioned when you had found theater as a young man, there was this lost quality to your life.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you found your home in this ecology?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. if not a home, I found a comfort or a
Mhm.
grounding.
Mhm.
You know, the unsettled qualities, or not feeling a sense of belonging, or not feeling quite a part of, um, just feeling, I guess, restless in my own skin, restless where I grew up, restless with bigger ideas, restless to just get life going. Um, I think as I grounded myself, or the theater community in Denver was able to help me ground, um, it it made me, I think, a more focused person, and then I could start thinking about bigger things, being, I guess, as being a part of a community, being a part of. I wasn't so um, I wasn't so self preoccupied.
Mhm.
Um, and I think some of that is just adolescence and growing
Yeah.
into and changing
Mhm.
environments, being able to have the agency to do things uh, on your own. Um, but you know what the thing about about Lita, and subsequently just my work in general,
Mhm.
is that, uh, it's always, for me, it always has to be based in collaboration or ensemble based work. Um,
Mhm.
Always wanted a family that really made work together. I never really, in all those years of making work, I found myself at the top of an organization, um, and as an artistic director, making decisions, but I I never ever intended or felt like I wanted to be anything but part of a group of people making work.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. How has your transition back to New York gone?
I mean, it's interesting because, it's a huge fast forward many years. The decision to leave Denver is not really one of leaving. It's
Mm.
just one of, not always, at least not having my address there. Prior to COVID,
Mhm.
um, when travel was not as, when the world was a little safer,
Mhm.
I still would be back, multiple times a year to
Absolutely.
work. And I think, uh, as much as I wanted to run away when I was a kid from those roots, they're what define me now. I mean,
Mhm.
my address is now in a different state, but I find myself really defined and always feeling like my roots are there.
Mhm.
Um, so now my work is different. It's, I've come back. I'm now working in and at a different level here, um, and have some of those opportunities that I think I wanted when I was 19,
Mhm.
but didn't know even how to find my way into those rooms anymore. Um, now, now those doors are open more. It really is on my time in Denver
Mhm.
that really kind of gave me my voice and gave me who I am. And
Yeah.
I,
You said you would come
like,
back.
yeah, I mean, life is not done,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Life is,
Better
uh,
not be.
chapters continue to write. And, we're here in this moment. Um, and what I realized with just even um, with the relocation here, it is what it is. It is in this moment. But who knows what the next chapter, maybe a return. I mean, though, Denver's changed so much, man, uh, our theater world. I mean, I stepped out of it as a resident for what seems like a nanosecond, and I don't know anybody anymore. I mean, things change,
Landscape.
and that's the way every community is, right?
Absolutely. You're talking about how quickly things change, and before we signed on today, I was watching the movie 2012, and I don't know how accurate the science is in 2012, but I mean, the way the plates shifted so quickly is kind of how I feel about it's a interesting callback that I wasn't anticipating in this podcast. It'll be like, yeah, no, things happen really fast. Theaters that were
Things happen
there,
fast.
yeah. When I was starting out, there was a theater done in a studio apartment, and then that moved to a rug store, and then it's gone, and you're like, whoa, like all these, and it's not that the people themselves that gave us those opportunities necessarily like gave up or their chapter ended. They're still creating. It just evolves.
Yeah.
I mean, and for a person such as yourself, like, I feel like what's been cool is like, I remember I would come and do a show with Susan Lyles at a warehouse, and you were there, and like, oh, Brian's really friendly. Love this guy. He seems so open and warm. And then as I got older, with my connection with the Catamounts, to see how your collaboration across across the nation, and to make yourself available for these things. I mean, like, this is you, and based on what you just told me, this is a guy that still wants to create, that his home is here. He will avail himself to those opportunities if they're the right ones.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have such deep love and affinity for, and I think what was interesting, the time that it was okay for me to put the warehouse aside, or put the company aside, it was tough because that was a personal decision, and it was a lot of collaborators that I was working with, and it was within that context that I was ready to make a different decision, as much as I wanted, and I have a partnership, and my partner had an opportunity in New York, and it was not a premeditated. She said, "Hey, I got an opportunity in New York. What do you think?" Yeah. Let's jump. Let's see what happens.
Got it back to play.
But what was interesting is that, when I closed that chapter, I did realize like how long I had really been kind of in the trenches of trying to bring what I thought needed to be a part of the theater community. And when I left, it was like, it's now time for other people to lead that charge, or to make other things. I mean, it's when I was younger, when we were first starting out, I mean, I had these other companies that I looked up to, and just, and it broke my heart when they closed. But as long as I spoke their work, or spoke their name, or spoke what their process was, it felt alive. And I think that I'm so eager to see this next generation of folks, and I get to come back. I get to have the best of both worlds, right? Absolutely. I get to come back and play now. I get to come back and tell tales of the old days. like an old codger. um, we get to tell tales about like the time in which there was actually like 5 reviewers that would come see your show, and then they printed reviews in newspapers that existed.
And you had to get ink on your hands if you wanted to read them.
Absolutely. And that you would, the tales of, just like the old days when you would go out to the plant, the old Denver Post plant where you could get the first review, because there was no internet. The first review would come out at 3 a.m. off the line, and you'd have to flag some guy down. And as much, those fun things that they don't exist anymore. But yeah, they're still fun.
We had John Moore on the pod a couple episodes back, and it was really good to have him on. One of the things that hearing you talk about, the newspapers and flagging a guy down at 3 a.m. Like, I remember the joy I had as a young actor cutting out reviews, even if I wasn't mentioned in them, like cutting them out of the paper and then like folding them up and saving them to show them to my mom, who already did it for me back at home.
Who already had her,
she already had it.
Book.
Yeah, it's like now it just feels weird to print off, Juliet Whitman from Westward, or printing them off the internet at all. It's just like, it's not the same as cutting it out. I feel like if I cut out a printer, like a sheet now, it just seems like I'm a sociopath making ransom notes.
I know, it's weird. It's weird. I've got boxes of old cuttings from all kinds, and I'm slowly trying to go through the exercise of scanning them, and then I go like, should I just toss this or should I still keep? The artifacting of it all, but hey, Matt, I have to say, you just mentioned Juliet Whitman, and word came to me that she's retiring, and I just have to, what a beautiful woman. And just like her, as we lose reviewers either to papers or just, it's their time to leave. I just have to give a shout out to her. She's always been kind of a wonderful, she wrote in that paper every week for, damn near, I remember her predecessors, but 15 plus years she wrote.
Been a staple.
And
she's been a staple.
Absolutely. And one of the most intelligent writers, I always, there used to be a moment when I would read her work and I didn't know if I was reading a review, but damn, did I love her critical thinking. She would use a piece as a jumping off point. So anyways, just talking about changes. But then, John's now writing again for a new paper. So there you go.
The Gazette. Big ups to the
Gazette. Yeah. Yep.
Before we transition out the door here, what are some of the biggest differences you've discovered in terms of New York and Colorado avant-garde theater in general?
Oh man, obviously, I think the biggest thing is, any place that you have a concentration of artists, you're going to have a concentration of work. So you have more people clearly, but I think the thing that I struggled with while I was there in Denver, and I've been more exposed to here, is this relationship of the performance community and their relationships to unions and their relationship to livable wage. I won't say that it's figured out here. It's far from it. But I will say that there are union contracts in this city that can't be negotiated in Colorado, which is a shame. A showcase contract, which by all intents and purposes is what everybody in kind of that mid-tier range is operating under, under 6 weeks, pay everybody about the same. The highest person is the person who gets paid the highest sets the bar for everybody. And that union contract just can't be written in Colorado, and I've never understood why. And I've kind of bemoaned the fact is that having a professionalized status or professionalized union, no matter what branch or scope of work that you're making, whether it's avant-garde all the way up to musical theater or commercial work, you really should be able to talk about what it is to look at these wages and professional paths. And not that the union is the only way to go. I mean, I'm not a union member, but I saw it being prohibitive for union folks and card members in Colorado. I mean, even to this day, I mean, the places they can't work, or that companies can't afford to bring an equity member in. So, I mean, I think that's a big hurdle. I think if you had more contracts on the union being more flexible into the work, I think you might see some paths to producers being able to work more with unions, and maybe professionalizing more and more the work. I think all of my ardent experimental avant-garde friends are probably rolling over right now. Listen to me talk, but I think it does come, it's not a side, it's not wholly a side trip. I do think it's about us trying to make this work and trying to find a way forward to where the really amazingly talented people can be allowed to work in their field, right? Not have to, if they don't want to, hold 5 different jobs down. There's a lot of us that like to spread things around, but we do have to, kind of talk about like how that happens. But truth be told, I mean, I don't think anywhere in the country's quite got that figured out. Yeah. But that's something that is just a little bit more acute. It's just more expensive here. People have to talk about money and what their art is worth. And, the decision to take a job means, literally, what does that mean to your bottom line? And
what does that mean to the roof over your head?
What does that mean to the roof over your head? And what I will also say, like, there is a difference that when we have, and Sam, you and I have been a part of some pretty amazing productions together, and looking at like what happens when something is a hit, or when kind of captures the town. And I do think like the investment in the arts that happens at some commercial and foundational levels in New York can take something like that and can step it up or keep that work happening. Whereas I think, my time in Denver and some of our, we see some of that work happen and we go, great, that's amazing. Can't wait to see what you do next. Yeah. Instead of like, what's the path forward to letting this show run for another 6 weeks? Or what's the path to take that show from the dairy and put it in, down in the complex somewhere? Yeah. Where are those trajectories to step up productions, or it's starting to happen. I'm starting to see,
Yeah.
you see it more and more in Colorado, but
I like the idea presented there. It should, in certain regards, it should be more about fostering the growth within a project and a company and the artists that are making it, as opposed to finding a way to plateau to maintain, hoping there's enough interest to plateau and make the same amount of dollars there, as opposed to
yeah,
like maybe if we do something different that changes how much, like maybe we make more because we're experimenting, we're growing, as opposed to just kind of like, oh, this note worked well, let's hit it again for the rest of the year, and then we'll
yeah,
reevaluate then maybe. That's great.
yeah, yeah.
Brian, as we get to this point in the podcast, we always ask our guests, what is that ghost light you wish was left on for you when you started your career? Or what would you leave on for the next generation?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Um, you know, I think that it's all, theater for me has always been a place of um, of safety and inclusivity, and I hope that the ghost light stays on and burns brighter for us to make that world even more inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that light really continues just to get brighter, because I mean, what it did for me, I know where I sit, it's in a pretty privileged place, and theater hasn't been as accessible to others that it was for me. And um, as I grew into that realization over my career, um, done everything to try to change that. But, I just want that to be the last thing, that it's always a safe space. It's always a place where people can come to and
Mm-hmm.
always feel that welcome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ah,
Yeah.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us today, being our guest back
Yeah.
after I think we took 3 weeks off. It was definitely a combination of not having the bandwidth, not having the time, and then being faced with the stark realities that are bigger than theater. Um, I want to again thank our guest, Brian Freeland, for sharing with us his journey. It was really, I'll be honest, at times inspiring and then just really enlightening. So thank you for being with us today.
You're
Um,
beautiful, Sam. Thank
uh,
you.
I appreciate it. I do look very good right now with my 5 o'clock shadow look. Um, this is
Hell of a date, man. I loved it.
hey, all right, that's right. Can I get your number? We do this again sometime.
Always. Come
Oh,
on.
sweet.
I'll even give you the real one.
Oh, ooh, this one doesn't begin with 555. Thanks.
Exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are the Ghost Lights podcast. I believe this is episode 70. It is. This is episode 70. We are 30 away from the hundo mark. Heck yeah. I love it. Thank you for being with us again, Brian. I think I've said that 3 times, but it needs to be said 3 times because it's the rules of 3, and that way you know it's the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Ghost Lights podcast. We will be back next week, but until then, please subscribe, tell your friends. I want to include you on this journey. Now, Dan, do the damn thing.